get you approved for it. Don Miller does a great job, but I also have some credit repair specialists that I work with as well. And we're probably going to have her on in a few weeks as well. Her name is Valerie Trudenti, and answering all of your questions. But tonight I'm super excited because I have a guest on, and many times when I have my guests on, I have a general level of comfort and I understand what their business is, and I'm comfortable with it and familiar with it. Well, tonight, folks, I am full of questions because this is something I had a little bit of information, and the more I learned, the more I realized that the information I had was incorrect, inaccurate, or completely wrong. So I want to welcome, and I'm super excited to have Jim Aubin as my guest tonight. Jim, welcome to the show, and please introduce yourself to our listeners and our viewers on Facebook Live.
Sure. Thank you for having me, Joe. So I've been in the solar industry for 8 years now. All of that has been residential, so my job in that time has just been finding people, educating them on how they get the power today, why it's not the best way for them most likely, and how solar could potentially save them money by getting power off their roof versus sticking with utility like they have until this point.
Okay. Now, if someone wants to reach out to you, because they're kicking around the idea, because everybody's talking about how much electric rates are going to be going up the next several years, how would they reach you?
Well, my personal number is 401-636-0540. The company that I'm with is Boundless Energy. It's boundlessinc.com. You can also find me on my personal website, jimaubinsolar.com, and also I'm on Facebook with that name as well.
All right, cool. Now, folks, if anybody has questions, and I'm going to be asking questions because, as I said, I'm very ignorant to what's going on here, and I'm eager to learn more. You can give us a call at 401-769-0600 here at the station, and JR will pick you up and let me know you're on hold. But the question I have is, what happens if someone is getting their electricity from a generator that's not Rhode Island Energy?
Oh,
And then they want to get electric panels, solar panels.
Sure, no problem. So I'm assuming you mean like a third-party supplier.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, so that doesn't play any difference at all.
Okay.
So the way it works is you buy your power directly from the utility, and they make all their money on the delivery side, actually.
Okay.
And then they can either sell you electricity that they get from their suppliers, or you can sign up with a third-party supplier, and it's just going through national or now Rhode Island Energy's infrastructure, and you're still paying Rhode Island Energy, then they pay the third-party supplier. So
Okay.
what we do is we design your system based on your year's usage in the house, which is reflected on that Rhode Island Energy bill. And we're just looking to offset as much of that as possible, so you don't need to buy power from the utility anymore, or at least less than what you used to.
Okay. Great. Now, what happened? I'm going to start off with the real basic stuff, so don't laugh too hard. What happens when you have a lot of cloudy days or a lot of rainy days, like up until today we've had recently?
Sure. So you definitely produce less power on a cloudy day than you do on a sunny day, right? But the way that we do our estimates is based on 30 years of weather data for this area.
Okay.
So that takes into account sunny summers, rainy summers, and so it's a very accurate but also usually more conservative estimate of what the system will produce.
Okay. And so now, how does that work? So let's say we have all these cloudy days, and the system is not producing a lot of electricity. So that means the electricity I use, I'm going to be buying directly from Rhode Island Energy or whomever, correct?
Correct, but the way it works is all of our customers, we sign them up with what's called net metering.
Okay.
And that's a utility program which allows a homeowner to store extra energy that they produced from their system didn't use with the grid for negative credits that appear on the Rhode Island Energy statement.
Okay.
And so you build up this bank of negative credits, like let's say it's $50 that is negative on your bill, and then it's cloudy or it's nighttime or it's winter, and it's just not producing a lot of power. You're going to buy that power from the grid, but your credits are going to get used first, like a gift card, before you're going to get charged a bill, if that makes sense.
That makes absolute sense, and that's folks. This is one of those things. You're going to hear me say this a lot tonight. That's something else I did not know. I didn't know how that worked. I wasn't sure if it got stored in the panels or if it's like batteries that did it or whatever. But
Yeah, common misperception. So, like, if you look at your meter today, it's
Mm-hmm.
probably the old school one where it's just a metal disc and it spins
Right.
around in one direction.
Yep.
So, when you get solar installed, they swapped it out with called a net meter or bi-directional meter.
Mm-hmm.
And so, during the day, it's sunny, you're producing power. Let's say you're using 10 kilowatt hours in the house, you produce 20. 10 of that is going to get used, and the other 10 is going to go out, spin the meter backwards, get stored out in the grid.
Mm-hmm.
And when the grid comes by and reads your meter, they see that as 10 less than it was last time they read it.
Yep.
So they give you that negative credit for that.
Okay. And so then the next time you have cloudy days, then you would tap into that. Okay.
Exactly.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. So, okay, now what is, and again, my experience is you see the guys knocking on doors, or you see the systems on the roof. That's been my exposure. I did. Well, I'll ask that question later. So, what happens? Somebody says, "Hey, I want to get solar panels." They call you up. What's that process look like? Like, what is the first thing that they do? What is the first thing you do? And then how long does it take until they can, start generating their own electricity?
Sure. So it is a process. So first, we need to make sure the house even qualifies for solar.
Okay.
If the person even going to benefit from solar, because a house that's buried in trees, gets no sunlight,
Yep.
is not going to benefit from a solar system most likely,
Okay.
right?
Yep.
They're not going to produce enough electricity of any significance to offset their current needs, right?
Okay.
So first thing we do is we come by, we do a consultation. We just break down really four things to you:
Mm-hmm.
how they get their power today and why it's so inefficient, how solar works with net metering, and then we break down their current utility bill, see how much they're paying per kilowatt hour or unit of electricity,
Mm-hmm.
and how many of those units they use in a whole year.
Okay.
And then we just go over the savings of the solar versus the utility and see if it makes sense for the homeowner. If it does, then we do a soft credit check,
Mm-hmm.
make sure that they're above the minimum, which is usually 600 or 650,
Mm-hmm.
and do all the paperwork to submit them into the portal. So that way we can do what's called a site survey.
Mm-hmm.
So we do the site survey, a truck rolls out, they measure the roof, check the condition of the shingles, they check the MPU in the basement, they check the rafters in the attic.
Okay.
Just make sure that the house can
What-
actually handle a solar
What is
system.
when you say MPU in
Oh.
the basement?
I'm sorry, it's the main panel,
Oh, okay.
like the circuit breakers or sometimes fuses.
Okay.
And
So if it has fuses, you can still put solar panels on.
no, so in that case
Okay.
we do a main panel upgrade
Okay.
because we can't tie into a box
Okay.
that's that old.
Yep.
Also, if they're under 100 amps, we're typically going to upgrade it. If
Mhm.
there's like deterioration, like rust or something, or just out of code,
Yep.
like, sometimes you show up like the main panel's in a closet or
Mhm.
it's next to the water main, and so
Right.
sometimes we're going to move the main panel. But that's what the site survey is for. It lets us identify anything that needs to be done
Mhm.
as part of the job. We call it a scope of work.
Yep.
And so then we get the final design back. The customer approves that. And then we pull permits from both the town and the utility. And that whole process takes about 2 months typically.
Okay.
It can go a little bit quicker,
Mhm.
but that's what we set the expectation for.
Okay.
And so then the system gets installed, usually in 1, sometimes 2 days. And then the town comes out and inspects and makes sure it's up to code. And then the utility comes out and swaps out the meter with the bidirectional meter.
Okay.
And then we turn you on.
Okay. Okay. Very good. So, and of course, the consumer, the homeowner, doesn't notice any interruption in service. It's just everything, they have electricity pretty much until it's unplugged and plugged in.
Yep, so they're using the utility until the system's turned on.
Yep.
When they install the system, the electrician will kill the power for like
Right.
an hour,
Yeah.
to tie in. But aside from that, no interruption.
Yep.
And then once the system's turned on, they start producing the power off the roof, and they stop buying as much power from the grid.
Okay.
And so usually within a month or two, like 1 or 2 statements from the utility, you're noticing that decrease in the utility bill and even amassing the negative credits.
Mm-hmm.
If you get turned on, at Christmas time, you're probably not going to see as much reduction as you would in July.
Right.
But, as the months move into the springtime and you're producing more and more power off the roof, then you start seeing that usage drop more and more and more.
Okay. So, what happens when it snows?
Yeah, so when it snows, the panels get covered up with snow, just like everything else, obviously. But what's good is the snow doesn't actually stay up there for very long, typically.
Okay. I didn't
because
think so. Okay.
Yeah, and that's because the roof is pitched,
Yep.
and the panels are really smooth, dark glass,
Mm-hmm.
and so it doesn't have a good. It's not easy for it to stick to the glass.
Mm-hmm.
So as soon as the sun comes out, starts hitting the panels again, the UV rays are actually what passes through the snow, hits the panels, starts creating a charge that warms up the panels a little bit, creates a little bit of melt, and the snow falls right off.
Okay. All right, excellent. Another question answered. Check.
Yep.
Okay.
And in fact, we've actually seen houses with solar have less ice dam instances, just
Ah.
because the snow doesn't have a chance to stay up there, freeze,
Yep.
melt, like it would on shingles.
So now question, so if you have a house, you know, a 2,000 square foot house, and if you have, I guess, more roof surface area, so you can put more panels on there, is there like a point at which it doesn't make sense to put more solar panels on the house? Even though we've got all this roof square footage, the most you want to put on here is X square feet of solar panels on a 4-bedroom house or whatever it is. Is there like some kind of formula like that or rules, you know, to that
Well,
effect?
so I will answer that in yes, there is a point where if a system was producing way too much power
Mm-hmm.
that you're not ever going to use, that would not be beneficial to you because you're paying for all this electricity or all this equipment that you're not using that from,
Okay.
right?
Yep.
But in reality, the utility actually limits the size system you can get based on your historical usage.
Oh, okay.
Yep. So if you only use 10,000 kilowatt hours a year with utility, you're not going to be able to get a system that's producing much more than 10,000 kilowatt hours.
Okay.
They'll literally just deny it, call it oversized, make us downsize it, and then resubmit the application.
Oh, that's interesting. Folks, I hope you're enjoying this because I'm learning so much, and I can of course share this with my clients when they ask me questions. So, all right, so the installation, how is it that, and again, forgive my ignorance, but I'm thinking when you're attaching something to a roof, you're drilling through the roof, how come it doesn't leak?
Yeah, sure. So the way that is done is what's called flashing, right?
Mhm.
So just like the way that your shingles work, I'm sure you know, is you have a shingle,
Yep.
it's got a bunch of nails on the top, and then they lay another shingle over the top, and that covers up the penetrations.
Yep.
So what we do is very similar. We get up onto the roof, we find your rafters, we penetrate directly into the rafter.
Mm-hmm.
We fill that with a 50-year warranted or rated sealant, and then we take the square piece of metal called the flashing, pick up the row of shingles above that penetration, slide the flashing over the penetration under the row of shingles, and then flat that back down. We put a bolt into the penetration, an L bracket attaches to the bolt, a railing attaches to the L bracket, and that's what the panel's attached to.
Oh, okay.
So when it rains, the water just goes right down over the flashing,
Yep.
and nothing can get into the penetration because it's all sealed up, and also it's raised a little bit.
Okay. All right, good to know. What is, how do solar panels impact homeowners' insurance? Does it make it go down, go up, or not really do anything?
Here in New England, from what I've seen, it typically doesn't affect a homeowner's insurance,
Mhm.
even if they own it. If your homeowner's insurance, like if you're worried about it, raising it, I would definitely recommend talking to them, give them
Yep.
a call, obviously,
Mhm.
if you're looking to buy the system.
Right.
Because if you're looking to buy it, then it's part of your house. But the way that I've always understood it is it falls typically under your umbrella
Mhm.
of your insurance. So if your system's $30,000 value or whatever, then it's usually just going to be covered by your umbrella and it'll be fall under that, right?
Okay.
But typically, from what I understand and what I've seen, is it doesn't raise the homeowner's insurance.
Yep.
But most of our customers actually don't buy the system. They do what's called a power purchase agreement or lease.
Mhm.
And so with that, the solar company actually puts $1 million insurance policy on both the system and your home in case there was some damage to your home from the solar system.
Okay. Now, what is, and I'm pretty sure I have an idea of the answer to this question, but what is the risk of fire or electrical mishaps with solar panels? I mean, I've never heard of any, so.
Mhm. It's the same as any other electronic in your house. You know, if it's properly installed,
Mhm.
it's all UL rated.
Yep.
It's very, very low chance of that. I also have not seen it happen.
Yep.
I'm sure it has happened in the past, but
Well, I mean, because like you hear, like, you know, with the you know, EV cars, that the batteries, and they get so hot, and the fire trucks can't even put them out with, you know, like 10,000 gallons of water to kill a fire on one car, electric car. So that, all right, that's good to know. Another question now, and I think I know the answer to this too. There's no risk to, because I've seem to have had a lot of clients, recently who work from home, and they're concerned about their, you know, their internet access and their, you know, what's going to happen to their computers if power goes out. Just like you have with the electric company now, the current coming into your home it's not going to fluctuate. It's going to be fine for computers and other electronic devices like monitors, TVs, et cetera, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Um, what, so you mentioned before the power purchase agreement, and then you can, so that's different than purchasing the panels.
Yes.
And there's also, I was at the home show this past spring, and I was talking to someone there who was just a consumer walking by. He purchased all of his own solar panels and put them on his house. Are those solar panels any different? And I know you don't know what this guy put on his house, but the solar panels that me or any of our listeners could purchase, those aren't the same ones that you guys buy, correct?
They most likely are.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Then you just have to worry about, putting them in.
Yeah, it's like anything else, like I did the HVAC at my house. I
Right.
did some heat put into my house. I was telling you that I bought a fixer-upper.
Yeah.
And I could have had a guy do it for, $3,000, but I felt like getting dirty and
Mm-hmm.
taking a chance, and I cut open my furnace myself and ran it for cheaper.
Yep.
But there's no warranties, and I had no idea if I did it right until heat showed up in my back room,
Right.
So
Yep.
for things like solar, while I definitely commend people like that, it might be best to at least talk to a
Yeah,
company, but-
I have this thing when I'm working with my buyers and we're looking at houses. My the quote that I like to say is just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Mhm.
Just because I can go to the store and buy a furnace doesn't mean I should put one in myself because I'm not that handy.
Mhm.
Just because I can, do plumbing work doesn't mean that I should. And there's a lot of evidence of that when I'm going around looking at houses with my buyers, and you just see all this like hack jobs that
Mhm.
people do because they don't. Yeah, you can do it, but it looks like, crap, and you don't get enough water pressure or whatever it is. But so I would suggest anyone, especially something as major as solar panels, that you use professionals. And I think keep it simple, stupid, because buy the panels from these guys, have them install it, and then you have no questions if something ever does go wrong. They can stand behind it and think, well, you put it in, you didn't put the right, whatchamacallit thingy to here. So, all right.
Yeah, typically your installer is going to provide you a production guarantee.
Mhm.
So you're going to be getting a guaranteed amount of electricity every single year. They'll often also put a warranty out there, so there won't be labor costs if you need to get something fixed.
Mhm.
They'll also obviously handle all the paperwork with the utility and the town and getting electrical stamped plans. There's so
Mhm.
many moving parts to
Yeah,
solar.
yep.
It's best just let a pro that knows what they're doing and have done hundreds or thousands of installs
Mhm.
versus just trying to figure it out on your own house.
Yep. Now, is there a difference if you're installing a system in Woonsocket, Cumberland, Providence, Westerly? Is there a difference as far as the municipality is concerned? Do their codes or regulations vary at all?
All the code is the same because they follow the national code.
Okay.
But as far as the only difference might be what's called fire setbacks. So it's the distance from the solar panel to the edge of the roof.
Okay.
So some towns have bigger fire setbacks, some have none.
Mhm.
Like Smithfield, I don't believe there's really any fire setbacks. In Warwick, it's 3 feet all around.
Oh,
And so
okay.
that can drastically limit how many panels can fit on your roof,
Mhm.
just because you can't enter these fire setbacks, which the towns say that they're for to allow firefighters to walk around the perimeter of the system
Mhm.
in case it was a house fire.
Okay.
But in reality, they can just actually rip off the panels pretty
Yep.
simply and then cut the access holes, whatever they need to do to put out a fire.
Okay. Folks, you're listening to the Joe Luca Real Estate Show right here on WNRI 99.9 FM, 1380 AM, and of course on WNRI.com. We have as our guest Jim Aubin, who is talking about and educating me and you guys about solar panels and why they make a lot of sense for some folks. Now, what happens if you have a small house? Is there like, not necessarily a tiny house, but there are some small houses out there that are like 500 square feet.
Sure.
Is a house ever too small to put solar panels on it?
As long as the fire setbacks aren't so big that we
Yep.
can't meet our minimum, we need to do at least 5 panels on the house.
Okay.
That's our minimum system size. So the only thing I could really see is maybe if the house, it's not so much the size of the house, it's the usage in the house,
Okay.
right? So if they're only using 1,000 kilowatt hours of the whole year, which believe it or not actually happens, that's just too low for us to have 5 panels produce enough.
Okay.
It would take only 2 or 3 panels to produce that much power.
Yep.
We can't exceed that because of the utility
Yep.
offset, right?
Mhm.
And so then our financiers and our installer won't let us do less than 5.
Yep.
So that's the only situation if you don't use enough power. But
Mhm.
these days everything's so electrical. It's
Yeah.
very rare they're going to meet someone that isn't doing that.
Yep.
Really, if you have an electric bill over $35 to $40, you most likely can see some savings from going solar,
Wow.
assuming that you're getting a fair price
Mhm.
with a program that's good for your situation, meaning
Yep.
either ownership or a third-party ownership like a lease or PPA.
Mhm. Okay. Now, you mentioned before about, I check their credit. Does it vary whether they're leasing or buying?
Yep.
As far as like the type of credit somebody has to have.
Yep. So if they're leasing slash PPA, it's a 650
Mhm.
with most everybody that I'm aware of. And then for ownership with us, it's 600, but I think most people are 650 to 600
Okay.
in that range.
Okay. All right. That's good to know. So, there's something you and I were talking about the other day, and I wanted to bring it up on the radio. So, when you purchase the panels, does my my use of electricity, the quantity that I use, is it any different if, how do I want to say this? Does it make a difference whether my panels are leased or owned if my usage changes? In other words, is it better if I'm using, I don't know, 15,000 kilowatts a year? Is that better to own or to lease, as far as the number side of it? That's
Right.
kind of a vague way of describing it, sorry.
No, it's fine. So I've got people that were high income earners that leased solar systems because it made the most sense for them.
Yep.
I've had people that were low income that bought a system because it made the most sense for them and what they wanted to do, right?
Mhm.
So it really comes down to a couple different things. As far as if you're owning it, you probably most likely definitely want to be able to claim the tax credit
Mhm.
because it's 30% of the total system cost you can claim as a tax credit
Yep.
to offset that. If you don't claim the tax credit because you don't make enough money, or that's usually the primary thing, you don't pay enough in taxes to get a tax credit, now you're financing and paying for the 100% of the system cost.
Mhm.
And so the numbers probably won't work out as well for you if
Mhm.
you're doing that versus only doing 70%,
Okay.
right? Some people don't want to buy a solar system, take on a 25-year loan because that's what most of the loan terms are.
Mhm.
So a lot of people are like, oh, I'm only going to be here for 5 to 7 years, but I don't want to pay full price for electricity for my house. But the solar company will own the solar system, so there's no loan for me,
Mhm.
and then they'll sell me the electricity for usually 20 to 30% cheaper than the utility selling me their electricity. So I need electricity either way. So if I can pay less for electricity at a
Mhm.
controlled price long term, instead of doing what I'm doing now, which is paying more for electricity at an uncontrolled price,
Mhm.
the first option makes more sense for me,
Right.
right? So a lot of people with jobs that could claim the tax credit at least a lot of times just because they see the value in buying a commodity for cheap at a controlled price versus more expensive at an uncontrolled price.
Mhm.
But also a lot of retired people like the lease PPA because they're on a fixed income. And so if they can get electricity for the rest of their lives and they know exactly what the price is going to be long term,
Mhm.
that's much better than just buying electricity at whatever rate the utility wants to charge them.
Okay, so that's interesting because I was thinking that, you'd be better off owning it. That way, when your payment every month is going to be X for the first 17 months, and then the second 8, the rest of them, however they break it up after the 18th month. I thought that would have been easier, but now because there are two components. There's the actual price for the panels,
Mhm.
and then the price for the electricity.
Right. Like you're doing it one of two ways. Like,
Mhm.
let's take cash off the table because
Mhm.
1% of people buy a solar system
Right.
cash, right?
Yep.
Either they're going to borrow money from a bank and they're going to pay for the panels and the equipment and the install with
Mhm.
the solar loan, and their solar loan payment is replacing the utility bill they used to have.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're paying the utility, let's say $200 a month, and you can get a no money down solar loan and the solar payment is fixed at $180 a month and it doesn't increase, well, you're instantly winning, right?
Mhm.
a lot of people like to use the term ROI in solar,
Mhm.
and it just goes to show they don't actually understand the solar financing side, because the only ROI in solar is if you pay cash.
Right.
How long is it going to take you to recoup that amount of money in electric savings, right?
Mhm.
But if you're borrowing money at no money down, and it costs you less per month to repay that money for the solar system than it costs you already to buy electricity from the utility, you're cash flow positive month one,
Mhm.
right? And then on the other end, if you don't want to buy the system, you don't want to take on that debt, you let the solar company put up the money. They make back their money over the long term by selling you their electricity at a price per kilowatt hour, and they tell you what that price per kilowatt hour is going to be every month, every year for the full 25 years.
Okay.
And
Wow.
so if you're paying $200 a month utility right now, if your electricity paying 25 cents per kilowatt hour, and you can buy electricity from the solar company at 20 cents per kilowatt hour, and it's only 150 a month, that's an instant win as well.
Mhm.
And then long term, you know exactly what the solar electricity price is going to be,
Mhm.
because right in the contract says year 1, 3, 5, all the way through to 25, what your price for electricity every month is going to be.
Okay. All right. So another question. I know that these can be installed on multifamily homes.
Mhm.
When it's installed on a multifamily home, how does it get divided up between each unit? Or is that not possible? And then, everybody shares in the savings? And like, how does that work? Is there one net meter and then everybody just splits it? Or how, you know what I'm saying?
Nope. So each meter would get its own system based on that meter's historical usage.
Oh, okay.
And so, like, let's say it was a three-family house,
Yeah.
and there was enough room for three systems on the roof, because remember, there might not always be enough room for
Mhm.
three whole systems.
Right.
But let's say that there is, and so each meter would get its own system to offset its own usage.
Okay.
As far as who's benefiting, so if the tenants are still hooked up, is still paying the utility bill, they're going to see the net metering credit show up on their bill.
Okay.
A lot of landlords, I know, everything included though, right? So with that, so I'm looking to buy a multifamily myself. I'm going to put solar on it, and I plan to just, let's say I was going to charge $1,200, and the solar's $100. I'll charge $1,300,
Mhm.
and everything's included, right?
Oh,
So-
okay. Yep. All right. Oh, what was my next question? Darn it. We're talking about multifamilies and then splitting. Oh, and I would imagine too, a system like that is going to cost more money because you've got 3 meters. So the meters probably cost whatever they cost. So you've got 3 of them instead of one. So that's going to be a more expensive system. Is that
Well,
true, or
it'd be three systems, three separate systems. So either three separate loans
okay?
or three separate PPA/leases.
And would that be like if in regular single-family houses, and I'm going to make up numbers, $25,000? Would that be $75,000 for a multifamily home, or because it's a smaller system, it would be a smaller price?
Well, so everything's so relative, right?
Yeah.
Like, I've installed big houses with small systems just because they're very conservative with their usage.
Mhm.
I've done big systems on small houses, right? So, assuming everything's equal,
Mhm.
and the single family house got a 5 kilowatt for $25,000, we'll call it 5 kilowatt system, and then the multifamily needed three 5 kilowatt systems. Yes, it'd be $25,000 for the single family, and then $75,000 for the multifamily.
Okay.
Right? But they're also using 3 times as much electricity, so their cost is also higher,
Mhm.
right? So it's all relative.
Okay. Very good. So, man, there's just so much awesome stuff to talk about here. So something else. Now I know we talked previously about how there are a lot of misconceptions, and you are actually kind of like a spokesman, a representative for the industry with regard to the local news channels. And tell us kind of some of the red flags that people should watch out for, and maybe share best practices, like how you guys do business, and why people should not look at companies to do business differently.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Please.
Yeah, so honestly, sometimes I really miss 8 years ago when almost nobody was doing solar, and there was really no bad actors out there because there wasn't really many actors at all, you know? So unfortunately, a couple companies have gotten into the space, and they try to overcharge customers or sell them loans that they can't claim a tax credit on, and that's why the industry's been on the news lately specifically for that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say number one, if your sales rep is really trying super aggressive tactics, be very wary. Also, if they're telling you erroneously that the tax credit is some sort of rebate
Mhm.
or IOU from the government, huge red flag. They're either lying to you or just completely ignorant. Because a tax credit, I'm sure you know, but hopefully everyone else knows, you can only claim a tax credit if you paid taxes in.
Mm-hmm.
You're just offsetting the amount of taxes that you owe.
Right.
So if you owe $10,000 worth of taxes, and you have a $10,000 tax credit, and you're a W-2 employee that paid out weekly your taxes, you're just getting back $10,000 of your own money.
Yep.
But if you don't make any money, you're retired, you just have low income, and you have $10,000 tax credit, but you only paid $1,000 in taxes, it's going to take you 10 whole years to get back that tax credit because
Mm-hmm.
you're only getting $1,000 per year.
Okay. Very interesting. All right. So, what are some, maybe one or two other things that people have, that the, less desirable installers, what are some, I don't want to say scams or games or things that they do that, are not right?
They definitely can install on roofs that should not have solar installed on them. So if your roof is over 15, 20 years old,
Mm-hmm.
you should probably get a new roof put on before you put solar panels onto it.
Does
Right.
it make a difference to, let's say my roof was installed 5 years ago, but it's a third layer or a second layer.
Mm.
Does that make a difference too?
Second layer would not, but a third layer is actually out of code.
Okay.
And so that would get called out by our site survey team,
Yep.
and they won't let us install on a roof that's not up to code.
Okay. All right. Good to know. Good to know. What about, conventional three-tap shingles, architectural shingles? Now I'm starting to see around the metal roofs that look like shingles.
Mm-hmm.
Do these have any impact on the efficiency or installation, the ease of installation of solar panels?
So the way that we train at our company at the very least is 3-tap shingle. We're usually going to let the customer know, like, hey, this is probably an older roof. It's probably 15 years plus, and we're probably going to want to replace this before we put the solar up there.
Okay.
What's good is we can actually wrap that into a solar project a lot of times. And so we're doing the roof as part of the solar install.
Mhm.
We work with a couple of local roofers. 3-tap shingle, usually a newer roof, so that's fine. And fortunately, the way that roofing is these days, even if you have a warranty on your shingles, if you talk to the manufacturer of the shingles, if the solar company installed the solar system per manufacturer's instructions, it's not going to void your roofing warranty.
Okay.
As far as the metal roof goes, there's two types of metal roofs out there actually. The most common one that we see these days is the metal shingles,
Mhm.
and then there's also what's called standing seam metal. So
Oh, I
that's
don't know
like the
about that.
flat panels, and then there's like metal seams sticking up every
Oh,
2
actually,
or
I
3
have seen
feet.
those up north.
Yeah, they're more popular up north.
Yep,
So
yep.
those are the easier ones to install solar on actually, because no penetrations are made. Everything just clamps onto the standing seam.
Ah.
The metal shingles, our company doesn't do it. Most nationwide installers don't do it because with those also have a lifetime warranty, but you need to work with the metal roof installer to
Mhm.
make the penetrations to not void the warranty. They charge extra. It's a whole long process with them, and so a lot of the bigger companies, we just do so many houses, we just choose not to even install on those,
Mhm.
just because it's such a longer timeline
Okay.
and added expense that we can't wrap into the solar project.
Yep.
So now the customer's coming out of pocket like $2,500 to have the metal roofing company come out and make the penetrations, and we go and install solar. And yeah, so
Yeah.
if you're looking to get solar and you want a metal roof, I would definitely recommend standing seam metal
Mhm.
versus the metal shingles.
Okay. All right. Now, okay, we're talking about the shingles, the installation. What is the technology? How much have these changed from, you said 8 years ago to now, and how much are they expected to change in the next 10 years? I mean, are there a lot of advances in solar panel technology, or is it pretty static?
So a lot of people, they look at their cell phone, they look at their tablet, they're like, look how much this has changed every
Yeah.
single year. So just so you know, solar was actually invented back in the 50s for the space race. It was mono and polycrystalline panels back then
Mm-hmm.
producing electricity that goes to an inverter that then gets used, right? It's the same exact technology today. It's just slightly more efficient.
Okay.
So in the last 8 years, like 8 years ago when I got in, the efficiency of the solar panel was probably about 17, 18%. Today the best ones are 23, 24%.
Okay.
So not a huge difference there. The main difference is just we manufacture so much more of it. It's driven down the price of it so much.
Okay. All right. Good to know. Good to know. Now, what, I guess what percentage of, if you know this, of current houses have solar panels, and what is the growth projection going forward? It is something like, okay, 5% of all houses have solar panels now, and we think, that'll, within 10 years, that'll be 25%. Or are there any, projections like that?
Sure, there's tons of solar industry projections from that. So as far as Rhode Island, I'd say we're probably more like 2% solar,
Mm-hmm.
5% maybe max, maybe in a couple towns, right?
Yep.
But as far as in the solar industry, at least like at our personal company, we think everyone that can get solar, for the most part, will have it within the next 10 years.
Okay.
And that's just simply because every single year the utility gets more expensive. They have a big problem, which costs them a lot of money, which is that A, they don't produce a lot of power locally, so it needs to come from further and further away.
Mm-hmm.
The reason for this is that a lot of coal-fired power plants and also nuclear plant in New England were shut down in the last 10, 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
So there's more people using more electricity and less power being produced locally. Also, most of our power is produced from natural gas. And so we don't produce any natural gas in the north, so we need to pipe it all in through only 3 pipelines.
Oh, wow.
And
okay.
so every winter what happens is, I'm sure you notice that every year electric prices go up. And it's doing it 25% actually this year in a couple weeks in October. And that's because natural gas pipelines, they feed 2 sources, the power plants and homes for heating. And so in the summer, it's only the power plants are buying the natural gas, so there's not much demand for it.
Mm-hmm.
But then in the winter, homes are also using it for heating as well as the power plants are buying it. So just supply and demand drives up the natural gas price because there's only so much natural gas coming in. It costs the power plants more to buy the natural gas, therefore it costs them more to make the electricity.
Yep.
Therefore we have to buy electricity at a higher price.
Okay.
And so that problem just keeps multiplying. That's just on the supply side too.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the delivery side, our infrastructure, all the telephone poles, wires, all that is the oldest in the country here in New England.
Really?
Yeah, just because it all started here back in the day.
Yeah.
Thomas Edison in New York City built the first power plant, moved up to Boston, and grew from there. So if Thomas Edison was still alive today, he would still be able to operate the grid because it has not changed.
Wow.
So it's 100 years old. They keep bandaging it. Every year it gets older and bigger. It costs more to maintain it. And guess who needs to pay that increase? The consumer, because the utilities pass along those increases to us.
So I guess, so it's a 100-year-old grid. What would if we built a new grid today, how would it be different? I mean, I don't know. When you say it's a 100-year-old grid, does that mean that the transformers and the telephone poles and the wires, or is it just the overall architecture and design? How would a new grid compare to an old grid?
Well, it's, all the architecture and design for sure,
Yeah.
as well as, there's some components that are newer. They replace transformers when they need to, but
Mhm.
there's a lot of old infrastructure mixed in with newer bandaged infrastructure. A lot of the wiring is older, and so there's a lot of leaks. You lose a lot of efficiency. In between the power plant and your house, 60% of the electricity that the power plant produces gets lost along the way due to resistance, leaks, things like that.
Okay.
So it's just such an old, decrepit infrastructure. It's
Yep.
not the most efficient. And so they really have 2 options, meaning the utility, either keep bandaging it for a lower cost, which increases every year, or somehow get billions of dollars and completely renovate the entire infrastructure,
Mm-hmm.
which who's going to pay for that?
Right.
The ratepayers. So
Mhm.
either it's a slow annual increase or just a huge whammy all at once.
Okay. Wow, that's all right. That's super interesting.
Yeah, it's just like solar is literally just solving a problem that we have and a lot of people aren't even aware of.
Yep.
Just our infrastructure and the way we get our electricity is so outdated and has so many different components that it's just so complicated, and the
Mhm.
cost to make the electricity and get it to your house goes up every single year. And so if you can get electricity off your roof, whether you own the equipment or you just buy electricity off your roof, and it's cheaper, it's better than just staying with the utility, which is just going to cost you more and more every year.
Mhm.
That's probably the most frustrating thing in my job. People argue and debate and think about it, and they're just paying the utility every month forever while
Right.
they're sitting and waiting.
Mhm. Yeah, interesting. What about commercial applications? Like, this radio station here, we have solar panels on the roof that've been here a million years. Um, does does it make sense for commercial companies to use solar panels to put them on their roof? Because they've got a lot of these old mills and factories. They have so much square footage up there.
Mm-hmm. So it can, for sure.
Mhm.
The problem is financing. So there's not as much commercial solar financing is available as there is residential financing.
Okay.
And certainly
So
not for the same
feasible.
25-year terms.
Yep.
So a lot of businesses don't have the capital to just buy a solar system outright.
Mhm.
And they might even struggle to find capital to finance the solar system at a term that actually lowers their cost.
Mhm.
Because if you can only finance $1 million solar system for 5 years,
Yeah.
it's probably cheaper to just keep paying your electric bill.
Yep. Yep.
Even if you do the math over 25 years, it might actually be cheaper to do the upfront
Mhm.
investment. It's just tough to swing that.
Okay.
So, and then even on the PPA/lease side, there's just not as many providers as there are for residential.
Yep.
But if they can swing it, then yes, it would definitely make sense.
Mhm. We were talking about our houses and our properties before, so we both have a lot of land. What is it possible? Is it feasible to say, you know what? I want to have my solar panels in the backside of my yard, so not on my house.
Mhm.
Is that something that is possible? Is it feasible? If not, because you lose all I guess the inefficiency of it because it's so far away, or
It is feasible. We call them ground mounts, and so
Okay.
as long as you have a good sized area that gets
Yeah.
enough sunlight, then yeah, it could work. The problem is it's going to cost you a little bit more for that,
Mhm.
just because we need to trench and we need to build a structure to put the panels on,
Okay.
versus just putting them onto your roof.
Yeah.
So, but fortunately, I say fortunately, just from the solar perspective, but
Mhm.
in New England, we actually have the highest electric rates in the country, and so we pay so much for electricity, even if someone needed got a solar system installed, got a new roof wrapped in, and got a main panel upgrade, it still usually costs them less than or at least equal to what they're just paying for electricity today.
Wow.
While in some states like Texas, for example, they have such a low utility cost, a lot of times people go solar and it costs them more for solar the first couple of years, and they just know that eventually the utility rate's going to pass their solar loan cost.
Wow. Okay. So once again, so ill-informed. So I was and I had taken like a green one of those classes that realtors offer
Cool.
a couple of years ago, and they were talking about how homes in Arizona, 100-degree heat, lots of sun, etc. It didn't make as much sense for them to have. They couldn't get the benefits, and of course I was thinking, well, if they can't get a benefit, we can't get a benefit. But the reason they probably can't get the benefit is because their electricity is so much cheaper
Yep.
than what we have here.
Arizona only pays about 10 cents per kilowatt hour, and it only
Yeah.
goes up about 1 or 2% per year.
Okay.
While in New England, we currently pay 25 cents per kilowatt hour, and it goes up on average over 10% per year. They're just
Now,
totally different markets.
How about California, though? My brother lives in Palm Springs,
Mhm.
and he's got a company that's in Irwindale, and their electric bills are just, now granted, it's a company, yes, but so New England, we're even higher than what they charge per kilowatt hour in California?
California is probably the highest,
Okay,
and then New England's close second.
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But the way that California is, they've had solar for so long, and so many people have gone solar. They did not only net metering version 1.0, which was the best time to go solar in California. The incentives were so great. Net metering was what's called 1-to-1, so you get full retail value
Yep.
for your negative credits. Then they rolled into NEM net metering 2.0, which lowered the incentives, but still made sense.
Mhm.
Now they're in NEM 3.0, which means that if you get solar, you also need to get a battery because you can't get any credits for sending extra power back to the grid.
Oh,
So
wow.
that's the way that it goes. By they I mean legislators and utility allow
Yeah.
solar to solve the problem But once the problem starts getting solved, they don't need to offer as many incentives or as
Mhm.
much benefit to the homeowner because the hard part's already getting done,
Mhm.
right? So we always say like the best time to go solar was a year ago.
Right.
The next best time is now
Yeah.
because 5, 10 years from now, there's gonna be so many people with solar, and maybe they'll have built some new cleaner power plants in the area. Odds are low, but maybe.
Mm.
And this problem's not gonna be as uh,
Prevalent.
prevalent, thank
Yeah.
you, as it is today.
Okay. So, all right, that's interesting. Yeah, because it's just, you think about the costs of everything, and I'm still kind of having like my mind meltdown. I'm thinking about all the things that I was, had erroneous information on. What do you find, I guess, is I want to just notice the time, holy cow.
That flew by, yeah.
It did. What is the best way for people to reach out to you and contact you if they have questions? Give just a couple of plugs for your company, and so people can, reach out to you or ask questions.
Sure. My company is Boundless Energy. My name is Jim Aubin. You can shoot me a text or give me a call if you have questions at 401-636-0540. You can find me on Facebook, Jim Aubin Solar Consultant. You can go to my website, jimaubinsolar.com, as well as our company, Boundless Energy, is on both Facebook as well as the internet at boundlessinc.com.
Okay, awesome. So folks, I want to thank Jim Aubin for coming in and answering like 5,000 questions that I had about solar panels, and I've learned so much, and hopefully I asked all the questions that I have kicking around in my head, but if I don't, I know how to reach him. You have been listening to the Joe Luca Real Estate Show right here on WNRI 99.9 FM, 1380 AM, and of course on WNRI.com. I want to thank our sponsors, GMETS Moving and Storage, the best move you'll ever make. GMETS Moving and Storage. They can move your belongings, they can store your belongings, and their phone number is 401-383-6399. That's GMETS Moving and Storage. Don Miller, your principal lender at North Point Bank, 401-241-9676. Don Miller, good friend of mine. We've done a good amount of business together, and he takes care of his clients in an upstanding manner. And of course, Vern Rainville, property. If you are a property owner and you have a claim on your insurance, he is a public insurance adjuster extraordinaire.